Trial began today for Lindsay Clancy. She, of course, is the Duxbury mother accused of murdering her three children and then attempting to commit suicide. It's been a very heavy trial since last week when jury selection started. Today, opening statements got underway, and NBC 10's Nicole Moeder has been following this case from the start. She joins us live from outside Plymouth Superior Court. So, Nicole, the two big things today were those opening statements, of course, from the defense and prosecution. We also heard from Lindsay's ex-husband then as the testimony began. So let's start with opening statements. What was your impression from both sides?
They were very emphatic, but to be honest, they were pretty much in line with what we expected. We, of course, expected the defense to say that Lindsay Clancy was mentally unwell, that she was over-medicated, that she was having a moment of psychosis in those 45 minutes when she went downstairs and killed her children. And then we expected the prosecution to say she had one intent, she knew what she was doing, this was calculated, and she murdered her children in cold blood. And that's basically what we heard. The prosecution, I would say, was a little more methodical in their delivery, whereas the defense, I should say, was a little bit more emotional. So I'm going to let you take a listen to a little bit of what the prosecution said, and then we'll chat about it, and then I'll let you take a listen to some of what the defense said as well.
Not a case about the Lindsay Clancy that sits before you today. This case is about the Lindsay Clancy on January 24th, 2023, at the time of the crimes. This was not a woman in the throes of psychosis on January 24th, 2023. This was a woman who acted intentionally, rationally, and swiftly to accomplish a very specific goal: to kill.
So as I was saying, pretty much in line with what we were expecting. All of their messaging was, she knew what she was doing. We will present the evidence. The evidence will show that she was not in this whirlwind of a mental, coming apart mentally. She knew what she was doing. This was premeditated. And you really saw that in the line of questioning that the prosecution asked Patrick Clancy when he was up on the stand. The defense, on the other hand, they were, as I said, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more emphatic in their delivery. Let's play a little bit of what they said, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Brought this charge. Tim Cruz, the DA, right in the front row, brought this charge. He knew, as did his office, the facts of this case. And he knew, when he brought this charge, that it was going to kill the soul of this young woman. And they would bring their evidence in front of a jury that she knows that she killed these children. We'll sit here, listen to their evidence, but I suggest to you that the issue for consideration is what was going on in that woman's mind.
And Nicole, you can see she's clearly very emotional there.
Yes, definitely. That's actually what I wanted to talk about first before we talk about what the defense said. The defense really sounded very similarly to in that motions hearing that we heard on Thursday, before court went to recess. But I have to say, the courtroom was packed, so it was hard to get a view of Lindsay very frequently. But when we did, she had her head down. She often had her head in her hands. She was breathing very heavily, so heavily that you could see her shoulders and her back moving up and down as she was basically hyperventilating, especially during the opening statements, especially during when the prosecution was speaking. And then actually after opening statements, the court took a short recess for about 20-25 minutes. And as the jury was being escorted out of the room, she had her head in her hands and she was sobbing. So just incredibly emotional moments. And I have to say that the jury has a direct line of sight of Lindsay. So they can see all of the ways that she's emoting throughout this trial. I had heard when I spoke with Kevin Reddington, the defense attorney, last week, that this was really hard on her, that she was getting hives, that when they would go through jury selection, she would shake, she would tremble. It was really hard for her to keep it together. And I think as this trial continues, especially as we see the testimony on Wednesday, it's not going to get any easier for her. And Wednesday is the day when Patrick Clancy is going to have to detail for the court what happened when he came home, when he, of course, found Lindsay on the ground after she had slit her wrists and tried to kill herself, jumping from the second story window. He made the 911 call, and then he went into the basement and found his 3 children. So that did not happen today, but it will happen when
Mhm.
court returns from recess on Wednesday. And I think the press, the jurors, the lawyers, the judge, everybody in that courtroom is really bracing themselves, because that is going to be some really dark and emotional stuff that everybody is going to have to sit through.
And I'm sure it had to already be dark and emotional today, just him walking through, the steps of the weeks leading up to it. And then, of course, the day of, saying goodbye to his kids, the last time he would ever see them alive.
Yes, it was really, the prosecution, what they had to do is they had to establish a timeline. So they had to walk through the weeks and months leading up to the incident. Lindsay was in and out of, she had seen a variety of different doctors. She was on a lot of different medications. She had been in a mental hospital for a brief period of time. And the prosecution, in order to bring the case and talk about everything that happened on that day, they, of course, had to outline everything that had happened leading up to that. So that was what we saw in the testimony today. Patrick was very flat and emotionless during most of his testimony. He did get very emotional when the court returned from the lunch recess, when the prosecution asked him to describe what his children were like. He was saying that Cora, their oldest, was really into princesses. She just wanted to take care of people. Callan, their youngest, was just a really happy baby. He was like, well, he was 8 months old, so he didn't really have any likes or dislikes. He was so young. Their middle child was into firefighters and trucks and all of that type of stuff, and he could barely get through a sentence. It was really hard to watch. And then right before the court broke for recess, Patrick described the final moments, which he obviously at the time did not know that it was those final moments, but the final moments of him saying goodbye to his children before he went to go pick up that takeout order that Lindsay Clancy had placed. So I'm going to let you listen to that, because I think I can't describe it as well as you seeing it. So let's take a listen.
Who called in the order to 3V?
Lindsay.
Once the order was placed, what did you do?
I came upstairs. I took Callan for a minute, and then I rocked him by my knees, kissed Cora on the head, and I said, I'll be right back.
And what was Dawson doing when you were leaving?
He was eating chicken nuggets on the couch.
And do you recall if he was using a bowl or a plate?
It was a bowl.
So tough to see those ordinary moments that I think, so as a parent, you take for granted that you're going to come home and your kids are going to be alive. And obviously he's experiencing something unimaginable. So to see that articulated on the stand had to be so tough.
And I have to say something that happened a little bit before that is the prosecution was doing a line of questioning that would establish that Lindsay had watched the kids many times, had frequently been texting back and forth, sending photos back and forth. And this was, something that the prosecution had asked about over multiple instances. So on that day, the prosecution asked, were you sending photos back and forth between you and Lindsay? And he said, yes, she sent me a picture of Cora. They had built a snowman. And then I sent a picture of Dawson. He had just dressed himself for the first time, and he was really excited about that. Or excuse me, she had taken Cora to the doctor's office. She sent him a picture of her at the doctor's office, and then he sent her a picture of Dawson, their middle child, who had just dressed himself for the first time. And it was just, little moments like that you really celebrate. And that happened in the morning. And then obviously the night was, I think both of them would say, the worst night of their lives. It was completely unimaginable what they went through and what Patrick returned to after he came back from that visit. So it's just moments like that. There was a birthday party that was discussed, watching Cora and all her friends saying happy birthday to her. Her birthday was in January, earlier in that month. So it's just, it cannot be overstated how emotional this is, how hard it is. The jury has to listen to all of this and internalize it and then ultimately make a decision. And I really, as a reporter, it's challenging for us, but as a juror, I imagine it is just even more challenging. And I cannot imagine what they are going through as they listen to this testimony. It is not. Both the prosecution and the defense admitted in or acknowledged in their opening statements that this is not going to be easy for any of them and that they appreciate them taking time out of their lives to be a part of this trial and hear all this testimony. But it's not going to get easier. This is just the beginning of a very, very long trial with some really emotional testimony to come.
Absolutely. So there's a break tomorrow. Court resumes on Wednesday. And Nicole Moeder, you will be covering this story for us throughout the duration of the trial. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us once again. And of course, you can stay with NBC 10 for complete updates throughout the day whenever court is in session. Mother on Trial, the Lindsay Clancy case. You can follow it online on YouTube, on turnto10.com, on the NBC 10 Facebook page, and of course on NBC 10. Thanks for joining us.